Hello there, interwebs, and welcome to Jessie Gender After Dark, where the nerdy gets sexy and the sexy gets nerdy. That's the slogan I'm sticking with for now. You can let me know if you thought of a better one down in the down below. But regardless, for today's video, I'm going to try and do something a little bit interesting in combining two different types of things that I like to do on this channel. One is reviews and two is recommendations, because I want to kind of do both today, because one of my favorite shows, Mythic Quest, finally came back for season 2 and its season 2 premiere. So I want to review the first episode of that premiere, but also kind of use it as sort of a backdoor way to tell you why, if you have not watched any of Mythic Quest, why you should be watching Mythic Quest. So this is going to be a spoiler-free review of the first episode of season 2 and sort of talking about that, and I'll put that in the latter half of this video. But up front, I want to talk a little bit about why I like Mythic Quest and why I think it's a really good show that you should be getting into, with some caveats here and there in terms of overall some things that I'm like, oh, yeah, I think they could do better with this, but overall, why I think it's a really great show. I also should say one of my friends, Nadertot, did a video on Mythic Quest as well that you should check out. He has a wonderful YouTube channel, and I think that he did a really good overview of why someone would watch this show and would like the show, and I agree with everything he said. But I want to kind of add my own 2 cents in this, because Mythic Quest, for those of you who don't know, is a show that follows a video game company making, you know, an MMO video game. And it's basically kind of a workplace comedy with, you know, set in sort of the video game world, which is something that we haven't really seen, but it's a setting that allows the show to feel like fresh and new by sort of having this new dynamic to a workplace comedy, while also still being able to lean into all those like workplace comedy tropes that you like. The other thing too I should say is this show is made by Rob McElroy and Charlie Pace, 2 of the creative forces and lead characters over on It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, which, so if you like that style of humor with like terrible people being really, really terrible, but used as sort of like directly targeted discussions of important topics and sort of you get to laugh at these characters instead of with them, this show does have that same sort of dynamic, though not as hard leaning into that as something like It's Always Sunny, because there are characters in the show, mainly the character that Rob McElroy plays, Ian, who is the sort of head of the company. He is the asshole, the guy who's full of himself, the sort of like self-important leader of the company. He's like, I see myself as a visionary, when the dude's just like making video games. He definitely feels very much like Mac in terms of what his character is in It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. He's not really stretching his acting legs all that much within the show. But the difference with this show is there are a lot of those like asshole-ish type of characters. I would think Danny Pundy, who many people may know from Community fame, also plays that sort of character, and he's delicious as like the evil asshole in the show. He's even more like the like Ian has some endearing things about him. Danny Pundy's character, nothing endearing about him. He is like the jerk who just like lives to make money and only make money within this sort of, you know, capitalist workplace thing. And so I think he does that really, really hilariously. But there are also characters that I really love in this show. But there are characters that I do love in the show, namely the first one, who is sort of the kind of pseudo-lead of the show, is Poppy, who is like the creative partner to Ian's character. She helps create the video games, and she's a woman working within the video game field. And I like that the show kind of uses the opportunity to sort of bring up like issues of sexism and some of the like issues within the video game development world that you know, wouldn't actually have to be addressed in this workplace. And so she's a woman in this world who doesn't necessarily get as much respect as her male counterparts. And I deeply enjoy and appreciate that she's done for that. But she's also she's that character who like has a lot of anxiety and self-doubt and doesn't really feel confident in herself. Kind of very much like the Liz Lemon dynamic that you saw in 30 Rock. And then Ian kind of plays the sort of Alec Baldwin type of character, where he's very full of himself, kind of like a jerk at some points, but he also like takes Poppy under his wing and tries to push her forward. And actually you get some kind of endearing moments out of that. They did an episode during quarantine, a quarantine episode that was all on Zoom that a lot of different shows did, and the ending of that Zoom episode, the quarantine episode they did, where it really highlighted the relationship between Ian and Poppy as sort of business partners and friends, really actually brought me to tears. I was actually very surprised. There's some really good, heartfelt, emotional moments that they get out of these characters that I would not have anticipated. Again, very similar to that Liz Lemon, Alec Baldwin, Jack Donaghy was the character's name, over on 30 Rock there. The other thing, too, is there's a team of playtesters in this show, played by Ashley Birch and Imani Hakim. Both of them are amazing. Many people probably know Ashley Birch from a lot of the video game work that she's done. She, you know, voices a lot of characters like Tiny Tina in Borderlands and a bunch of other things as well. She's also written for a bunch of different video games. She's also famous for her YouTube channel years and years ago, which sort of started off her career. And I'm really glad that she's getting to be live action and front and center within the show, because she is absolutely adorable. She kind of plays that like adorable millennial character. She's a lesbian who kind of has feelings for her playtesting partner, and sort of like trying to figure out how to express that. And so again, they're playing very much the like kind of parody of millennial characters, but they also feel very real in their own selves. And I think that what I love most about them is they get a lot of the like comedy and inclusive comedy very much right between these two characters. Like I said, it's a lesbian focused relationship between the two of them. There's a lot of adorable jokes between there. One thing that I will highlight in season 2, they actually get a lot of the jokes right, and like put the like when we get into a lot of like millennial comedy, it can kind of feel like belittling millennials and how we talk about certain things, and like how we're trying to be more inclusive of different identities. And there's some elements of that humor here, like making fun of like we just want to respect your identity stuff. But it always targets that as like not making fun of like the ideology of like trying to be inclusive and diverse, and not putting down and belittling the sort of millennials, but sort of like poking fun and ribbing fun at that sort of dynamic. One of the greatest moments that I think I can express to point this out, and what made me really happy, is there's a moment in the season 2 premiere where Ashley Birch's character is sort of trying to express that she's feeling like not sure how to talk to her girlfriend and everything like that, and she has these like wonderful lines, just like, oh no, what if she's not cis? I thought she was cis, meaning cisgender, meaning it's like she might be trans. And so the whole like joke was like she was worried that she had assumed that she was cis, that the girl that she has a crush on is cisgender, and she was worried like, oh no, she might be trans. And that was such like, I don't know, that joke worked for me, because it wasn't like belittling the fact that like, oh no, someone might be trans, like the joke being like, oh no, she might secretly be trans. That's sort of terrifying, like that sort of like very transphobic type of humor. Yet it was also like kind of playing into this millennial stuff, like, oh no, I'm assuming people's identities, like that's really funny, because that is that sort of like worry of like, oh no, I made a mistake about identity, I misjudged, like that humor is there, but it's not like doing it in a transphobic or homophobic or belittling way. And I think that that's really, really awesome, and I just really like Ashley Birch's character and sort of her dynamic as well, to sort of highlight that. And she is also a writer on the show, so I cannot recommend that enough. Overall, this is a fantastic show. There's some other characters as well that I don't have all the time to highlight. Like there's one of the writer characters who's like writes the video games, who feels like he's like a Shakespearean type of writer, but again, he's just writing MMO stories. Is a fun little dynamic to have there. They also do some like really cool stuff with the fact that they are a video game company, so there are some nerdier type episodes that sort of fall outside the normal workplace environment. So you get like episodes where they're like, we're gonna go on a quest, and like leans into the fantasy elements of MMOs and sort of playing with the stuff. They also get very political a lot of the time as well. Like there's an episode in season 1 where a bunch of Nazis, like alt-writers, sort of take over their MMO at one point, and so they created the game like, oh, we don't want Nazis in our game, so how do we try and get them out while also not seeming like trying to do the capitalist thing, and like not trying to ostracize too much of our audience. Like we still want to make money, but we also don't want the Nazis in here, and sort of that like, oh, are we willing to sacrifice our values sort of thing. Like there's some actual good biting political humor in here as well. It doesn't go as far as it's like something like It's Always Sunny does, or what I hope the series would do. I mean, this show is produced by Ubisoft, which is a big video game company with a lot of its own problems. So there are some things that I feel like could have been addressed within this show if it wanted to be a little bit more biting, that don't get talked about. I think like the main thing is crunch. The show doesn't really talk to, there's some allusions to it here and there, but the show doesn't really talk about crunch as an issue within the video game industry as much as it should, given that that is such a prevalent and important topic to talk about when we talk about video games. For those of you who don't know what crunch is, it's when companies force their employees to overwork for months or weeks on end to get the weeks, months, possibly even years on end to get their video game out in time. And it's a pervasive problem within the video game industry. You can find stuff with like Naughty Dog. Crunch was so bad that people needed to work so hard and so many hours per week that one of their employees like literally bought a house near the company away from his wife and child for just a little while, because he just needed to focus on work, which is a terrible thing, and people should be allowed to live their lives. Anyways, that's a sort of side topic to this, but crunch is a big problem with the video game industry, and this show doesn't really address it. I think partially because it's funded by someone like Ubisoft, and Ubisoft isn't interested in highlighting that sort of stuff, which sucks. But the show doesn't necessarily need to be a biting political work to to work. And I do think the political stuff that's in there is good. I just think that it could go a little bit further for my taste. But as a workplace comedy that sort of does like nerdy millennial stuff, I'm in for it overall. So on the whole, and I kind of said I would review the season 2 premiere. I've kind of spent most of this review talking about how much I love the show overall. The season 2 premiere, I thought like leaned into this really well. I feel like there's a little bit of a reset with the show with season 2, not like a complete reboot in any way, but like they kind of change up some of the dynamics between the characters that I think works a little bit better. For example, there's a character named Joe who's like kind of a complete jerk, and like she's an assistant to different characters. They put her with Danny Pundi instead of the other character that she was sort of working for earlier on in the show, and I think their dynamic works a little bit better as well. So I like that there's a little bit of change in dynamic between these characters and sort of setups. And so season 2 I think looks to be just as good as season 1, judging from the first 2 episodes so far. So I cannot recommend this show enough. I highly recommend that you give it a watch. And yeah, I think that's where I can end it. So thank you so much for watching this. Have you seen Mythic Quest? Mythic Quest. Have you seen Mythic Quest? I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. Don't forget, also, I have my main channel, Jessie Gender, where I do more video essay discussions rather than sort of like freeform me just nerding out. I keep combining words weirdly. I don't know why I'm doing that. Nerding out about like stuff that this channel is. This channel is just more of me freeform talking about stuff that I'm really geeking out about. My main channel, Jessie Gender's more video essay stuff. You can check out both of those. The links are down below. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. I also have a Patreon as well that you can support me at and help me do what I do. But beyond all of that, I am just glad that you stopped by, and I hope that you, as always, live long and stay sexy.